Welcome to Mythical Phylogeny Adventures. I'm your guide Jason. In most fantasy series, offensive magic is usually focused on the primary elements. And probably the series which most focuses on them was the Avatar series, The Last Airbender, and Legend of Korra. So today, I want to argue which type of bender is actually the strongest. Who would win in a fight? I will be dividing this into two different categories. The first is the Amateur League, the rookies and novices, and the other is the Masters. It is because the difference in the two does change the winner. Now, I know Avatar The Last Airbender has been out for a few decades, but I still want to go over a few things, such as the basics. In the Avatar series, there are warriors called Benders, and there are four major groups: Waterbenders, Earthbenders, Firebenders, and Airbenders. Yes, there's other stuff like energy bending, but those are limited to just the Avatar and a few other exceptions. So, at the most basic level, a bender is born with the ability to control and manipulate one element by using martial arts, and their abilities improve with training. Let's start with the waterbenders. They control water, ice, clouds, and steam. Now, they'll use the water to form whips to grab, or cover foes in ice to bind them, and blades to cut. In addition, they can change water from one form to the other. This is the element of change and adaptation. They are limited in their access to water, of course. Thus, while you will often see waterbenders carrying water bottles with them, the more experienced and adaptable waterbenders have found alternative sources of water. And this is why I am separating the novices from the masters, with each bending form having advanced subclasses. And for waterbenders, that includes plant bending and blood bending. Plant bending involves controlling the water within plants, normally vines and seaweed, to use them as solid whips and clubs. Of course, this is limited by the presence of the vines. Yet, it is the last version which I do want to look at, and it is blood bending. The human body is mostly water, so a talented waterbender can bend the water in a person's body. Outside of making blades and blood bending, it's actually pretty weak offensively, but really strong defensively. Their mentality is adapting from attack to defense and back, turning their foes' attacks into their own defense and the back to offense. They are the give and take, the push and pull. Yet, they have one final ability which can be a game changer, and that is healing powers. This can help if the fight gets dragged out and they get hurt. The next bending art is earth bending, controlling the earth. They throw rocks and create walls. They focus on waiting until the right moment to strike. They will weather any attack. Of course, their biggest weakness is being separated from the ground. If there is no dirt around them, they can't do anything. Which is actually really hard to pull off, since you always have to stand on something. A prison of wood being their biggest weakness. But there are subsets of earth bending as well. The first is not actually bending, but seeing, and that is the seismic sense, a technique to see through vibrations in the ground. This allows them to fight blind, such as Toph. This gives a nearly 360-degree vision, but not vision above, though they can still sense the dirt in the air, including dust. In addition, there are things like lava bending and sand bending. Both are just niche cases of stone. But more importantly, there is metal bending. This is more difficult, but allows them to manipulate metal. For earthbenders, most of the damage that they can deliver is blunt force trauma, but there's a high chance of broken bones with these attacks. But they can also bury and trap foes in the earth. Next is firebending. And this is pretty straightforward. It's throwing fire. This is probably the most terrifying for most people to see. As to how bad the damage is, it will depend on the temperature and the length of the exposure to the heat. This means that most attacks will be superficial and unlikely to immediately be life-threatening. Yes, burns are painful and difficult to heal, but you can deal with them for a while. Yet lightning is more dangerous, and is a subset of firebending. This is more prone to cause internal injuries, though people do survive it, but are usually knocked out after the initial attack. In addition, there is combustion, which can create explosions and greater range of attacks. Offensively, this is the most direct of the bending arts, and doesn't have much for control or manipulation, but can be used for flight and mobility to an extent. Unlike the others, they can create fire, while the other kind of benders can be deprived of their elements, to an extent. They are the element of ambition, and they tend to focus on being on the offensive. And lastly, we have the airbenders. They control the air, and are always going to have access to it. They can use it to create wind blasts to throw things around. Tornadoes can generate plenty of destructive force to be sure. Though, one of their most deadly techniques is pulling the air from the lungs. This can collapse the lungs and cause suffocation, and with it, death. But this will take time to be effective. Overall, airbending lacks much on the offense, and prefers evasive maneuvers. They are pacifists by nature. They are like trying to grab the wind in a fight, dodging and always moving, which means it is difficult to land a decisive blow in this fight. Yet, they do possess an important ability, and that is flight. With this, they can quickly get out of the reach of their opponents, perfect for running away from a fight. In addition, they can regulate their body temperature to help protect themselves from some heat and cold. So, which of these elements is best in a fight? Well, again, I will be splitting it between amateurs and masters in this battle. So with the amateurs, they won't have access to the advanced arts and only the basics. So, throwing rocks and fire, air blasts, water whips, and making walls of earth and ice, and so on. Well, airbenders aren't going to do too much in damage. Yeah, they can knock people around and send them flying. But unless they can fling their foe off a cliff, they are probably not going to win too many fights here. So the real fight is likely going to be between the earth, fire, and water benders. While we see waterbenders making ice that is going to be more fragile than stone and would melt to fire, though the fire would be extinguished by the water, so water and firebenders are about equal. But fire is better able to inflict damage, even though the ice can incapacitate the firebender. So their fight will come down to who can strike first, and I think the waterbender will trap the firebender before the flames melt the ice. There is a firebending technique to melt themselves from the ice, but that takes time and some training. Yet the earthbender can counter both. Their stone walls are going to make for a solid defense against flames, a bit less against curving water attacks, but overall a difficult defense to counter. In addition, their attacks have the highest chance of major injuries, plus attacking from the ground with a prison, and neither firebenders or waterbenders will get too far from the earth. So overall, at the amateur bracket, it would seem that the earthbenders are the best, with airbenders being the worst. But when we move to the masters, it's a whole different stories. And unfortunately, the first casualty at this level is going to be the firebenders. They gain 2 powerful offensive attacks, which can cause much greater injuries. Basically, these will end up being one-shot builds. They bolster their offense, but not their defense. Though, they can use the fire for propulsion, so they can gain some speed. Basically, they dedicate themselves to being an offensive glass cannon build. They are dedicated on this strategy, but the others didn't. So if their first strike fails, they will fall behind. The other benders have added more than just offenses. In third place will be the waterbenders. Their offense hasn't improved much, but what has is their crowd control. Bloodbending lets them physically control their foes. If they can catch their foe under such a condition, it's basically victory. Breaking free of it seems difficult. Of course, there's a limit that most bloodbenders do need a full moon, but there are exceptions. And we are planning with masters, so let's go with it. In addition, if a waterbender does get hurt, they are able to heal themselves. This means that if they are injured in a fight, they should get distance and focus on healing themselves. But can they get the distance? Yet the last two have one major advantage. Earth and air are always available, beneath you and around you. Escaping them is going to be much harder. Against an airbender, that is actually going to be difficult. They can get airborne with flight and remain out of the range of others. This allows them to take a page out of the earthbender's book and wait for the autumn time to strike. They could easily deliver an air blast from above, and by pulling the air from their foe's lungs, they will pass out. This is another instant win situation, and one where you can't counter. You can't grab the air to pull it back. Throw in their dodging abilities, and they are going to be difficult to hit. So they will be difficult to deal with, but they aren't alone on that front. And that is the Earthbender. A common trick they have used is to bury themselves, create a little safe haven for themselves to hide in, a place where the others can't reach. Except that they will need to breathe, so they will need an opening. So the issue comes down to whether or not the Airbender could find this opening, and that would be by looking for small air currents. But eventually the Airbender will need to rest, and that means touching the ground. And that is when the Earthbender could use their seismic sense to pick up their location. Honestly, with this tactic, there is little reason that the 100 years of war should have lasted. Just have the Earth Nation army slip along underground to launch an unpreventable surprise attack on all the Fire Nation bases. So the fight is ultimately between the Air and Earthbender. And the winner will be who is better at hide and seek. I think that the Earthbender will win once the Airbender needs to rest. Sadly, this will be a longer fight rather than a quick battle. What do you think, adventurers? Do you agree that the winner of this fight will benefit from stealth and searching abilities to overcome their foe? Though the winner can be influenced by other factors when brought into a fight. Who do you think is the strongest bending style? Thank you for watching, adventurers. Please return next time. Until then, I'll see you on the roads.